and subservient. But not with the type of domestic housekeeping helper we have today. Thank you. Right? They're not purchased by us. They're just working for us for a certain fixed period of time, and they have the din of the halach of a regular non-Jew. And if they were to cook a food that's not edible raw and would be served at a king's table, it would be a problem of Bishul Akum. If a non-Jewish housekeeper cooked in the home, we could sometimes combine two opinions that say as follows. The rabbis did not prohibit that which was cooked in a Jew's home, because in a Jew's home is a Jewish environment. We're not worried about it coming to intermarriage. Concern of intermarriage is when you go out of a Jewish environment. Even though we don't actually accept this opinion, the second opinion is, second reason is because a shivcha, a maidservant, was not part of the original prohibition. The prohibition was originally established. We don't want to come to develop a close relationship with another non-Jew. But a shivcha already has a pre-existing relationship where she's just working there. It's less of a concern. In some communities, they allowed the non-Jewish housekeepers to do cooking. Why? Because there were a lot of Jewish people around. Because the fires needed tending. You have to actually soak the clay. They're talking about the fires in the olden days, where you had like a bonfire. You have to stoke the fire, you have to put in some logs, you have to put in, or stoke the coals and the like, or fan it. We're going to say that certainly at some point, one of the members of the household contributed towards the cooking process through putting in a log or a coal or fanning the fire, and therefore it's going to be considered Bishul Yisrael. The poskim say if a person's in a case of need, like in a pinch, if a person's in a case of duress, you can rely on these leniencies. In a place where you don't have a strong need, one should not rely on this. So the meaning is not to rely on these leniencies. This is all talking about in the olden days where you had a fire, like a bonfire, which needed constant care. Today it's different. You turn on the flame, if it's a gas oven or gas stove, you turn on the flame once, you get the setting and you let it go. Or if it's electric, the same thing. So it doesn't need constant tending, and therefore you cannot say, oh, someone in the family definitely went around and stoked the flame. No, it's not necessary. So therefore that whole basis for the leniency does not apply today. Talking about in those days when it was the norm of family members to go and stoke the fire, then that particular heter was applicable. The ovens that we have today, we don't actually stoke the fire. One should not be lenient to allow a non-Jewish housekeeper to cook in the home. So again, the net result is that today, because we have modified and we have more advanced type of cooking apparatuses, we have a gas oven or a stove or an electric oven where you just turn on the gas or the electricity and it just stays in a steady setting for the rest of the time. It's not necessary to constantly to tend to and stoke it. Therefore, you cannot have the svara and say, oh, one of the family members certainly was involved in stoking the flame. No, it's not necessary today. Now, halacha tes, even according to the custom of those that are lenient, because even those that are lenient, the Jew has to be coming and going, in order that the housekeeper is not going to mix forbidden mixture like milk and meat. That's another concern which has to be addressed effectively as well. So when a non-Jew, just one second, when a housekeeper cooks for someone else, it's derech avdos. They're doing it because it's part of their servitude. There is some basis of leniency and say, oh, they're doing it for servitude, and therefore it's not going to bring to a sense of closeness. When they're cooking for themselves, it's not being done out of servitude, then it's for sure usher, and then it's for sure Bishul Akum is going to make the kelim also usher. Yes, question?
Sorry. I'm just curious because you were saying this applies to like a slave that's like always in the house, but isn't like on the seventh year, like all slaves are like freed?
Jewish slaves are freed.
Oh, okay. This is
Yeah.
And none of this this doesn't apply today, so like,
No, it does not apply to that.
okay.
No.
Can I just ask, with all respect, why do we learn it then still? Like,
Because it's bringing out the point. In order to understand something properly, you have to understand what it's not.
okay.
There's two aspects of understanding something. Understanding what it is, understanding what it's not. So in order to understand what it is today, we have to understand what it's not. It's not like a real slave, and that's why it is like just a person who has a job, and therefore it would be us. It would be a problem.
Okay. Thank you.
In Chassidus, it speaks about there's two levels of understanding. Yediyas Hashlila, knowing what it's not, is a lower level of understanding, but it's part of the understanding. Yud. Until now, we're speaking about if a non-Jewish housekeeper, they cook for the Jewish person, for the person they're working for. If she's cooking for herself, then one should not partake in the food that she cooked, even b'di'eved. One should be careful that a housekeeper or a maidservant or someone who's helping out in the house who's not Jewish should not cook for themselves. Kiven shem yivashlu, if they're going to cook, yosur gam hakelim, the vessels will become asur mishum shenispashal behem davar asur, because they were used to cook a davar asur in them. Bishul Akum, b'mikra bishul la'atzma, in a situation where she cooked for herself, yesh lishol sheilas chacham, you have to ask a shayla because it's a problem. Now, in Halacha Yud Aleph, we're going to get into the discussion. What kind of activity must a Jew do in order to quantify and to qualify as valid participation to make the food Bishul Yisrael? Actually, just has to be a significant contribution, but doesn't have to be a very long one either. It could just be that the Jew raised a flame or put the pot down on the fire, according to the Sfardim, according to Beis Yosef. That's what it has to be. But according to the Ramah, that's enough as well. But it's even enough to raise the flame, or to start the fire, or to stir the food. The idea is any kind of activity that's a necessary component in making the food ready would qualify according to the Ramah, according to the Ashkenazi tradition. According to the Sephardic tradition, you actually have to put the pot down on the fire itself. Shituf Yisrael b'Bishul. So the Jews' participation in the cooking. Bishul Akum, foods cooked by a non-Jew are usher if the non-Jew does the entire cooking process from A to Z, from the beginning to end. The Jew had no participation in it. If the Jew was involved in the cooking process, like if the Jew took the pot off the fire before the cooking was complete, and afterwards the Jew put the pot back down. The Jew put the pot back down on the fire. Now we turn the page. Page Ayin. The beginning of the cooking process. The Jew stoked the coals or stirred the pot. That's enough of an activity to save the food from Bishul Akum. It's considered that the Jew was involved in the cooking process. Because now the food will cook a little more quickly. The Jew's effect is lingering. Or even if a Jew threw in one slight twig of wood into the oven, or if the Jew, the The non-Jew lit a fire, but took fire from a fire that a Jew lit. So let's say, for example, a Jew lit a very long candle. It's going to burn for many days. And a non-Jew took a match and lit a fire from there. That's called secondary fire. It's Eish Me'esh Yisrael. Fire from a Jewish fire. It's permissible. Some say one should only rely on this heter of Eish Me'esh Yisrael only if it's being done in a Jew's home, because then you have the other opinion that's more lenient because it's being done in a Jewish environment. But and only in a situation under duress, but you have no other choice. Because there are different opinions about this matter. If the non-Jew completed the cooking from beginning to end, even let's say the Jew puts it back in the fire because it's going to get caramelized better now, it's going to become really crispy. But then the Jew did not fix the food and did not make it Bishul Yisrael, because the Isser of Bishul Akum already got attached to it by the fact that it got cooked fully by the non-Jew. These Tatum only apply to the Ashkenazi community. The Sfardim are stricter. Even if the Jew lit the fire on the grate, the stove top, but the non-Jew put the pot down, Nikra Adayin Bishul Akum, because according to the Mechaber, according to the Sephardic tradition, in order to make it Bishul Beis Yosef, the Jew has to actually put the pot down on the fire. Tzimas Kedei Al Ha'esh, according to the Beis Yosef, is what does it. It's not enough to merely turn on the fire, according to the Beis Yosef.
And I can use it to bring plastic room, like it's from the co-op, from college. So we don't have to wash the pot. It was from that only
From Pas. That's correct, only by Pas. But by Bishul Akum, we're going to get to this later toward the end of our studies. But I'm going to, since you asked the question, it's an excellent question. There's a machlokes about this, whether or not Bishul Akum makes the vessel not kosher. And under ordinary circumstances, without any other reasons to be lenient, we would be stringent and say it would make the vessel also not kosher. So it's stricter in this regard than it is with regards to the halachas of Pas Akum. So if a non-Jew, let's say, bakes a steak, besides the fact that the steak is not kosher to eat, even though the ingredients were kosher, because the non-Jew cooked it from beginning to end, also the pot in which it's being the steak is being baked in would have to get kosher as well.
It was like if you just do something like on a pan in the oven, would it affect the oven also? Not just like this.
Probably not. You didn't bake directly on the oven, no.
Okay. So also like a stove is fine, the pot is down. It's just like
Right, the burner would be fine, yeah. And even how we kosher from Bishul Akum, we're a little bit more lenient about it as well, because it's an Issa D'Rabbanan. We're going to get to all these details in the session. Any other questions? Okay, so I wrote an article many years ago. I should get back into writing. It's called Technological Tension. And the purpose of this article is to address the following reality that we face in society. We live in a society where technological advances are constantly changing, new technology, and with the changes of technology, it creates new questions in halacha. In other words, the halacha remains the same, but how to apply the halacha becomes a question. So, for example, the old ovens, they had a burning pilot. You have a burning pilot in the oven, and the Jew lights the pilot. Then you have Jewish fire there all the time. If a non-Jew just raises that flame and cooks, it would still be considered to be Bishul Yisrael, according to the Ramah. Probably the Jew would have to put the food actually in the oven. But today's ovens, in order to save on, I guess, they want to become more efficient. They don't want a burning pilot. They have electronic ignition. So when you turn on the oven itself, you're not actually activating an existing flame and making it bigger. You're not just pulling from that flame and saying, become larger now. You're actually creating a new flame, a new spark. And that's a problem because if the Jew didn't like that, then it would be Bishul Akum. So the old ovens were very, very friendly to Jewish people with regards to the laws of Bishul Akum. And today's commercial ovens, like the Vikings, the 6-burner ones, the ones they have in commercial settings, those, the grates themselves have a little burning pilot under them. If a Jew lit all those burning pilots and a non-Jew just raised the flame on those, again, you have the built-in protection against Bishul Akum because the fire was a Jewish fire there. Whether or not the oven has a burning pilot, I don't know, but if it does, again, you'd be protected. But if you get one of these electronic ignition ovens, you don't have that built-in protection. So when you go shop for a new oven in Tishan one day in your house, you can ask the sales representative if they still have ovens with burning pilots. And if they do, you can consider getting one. Now, speaking of technology, it's also advisable to stay away from those glass stove top type of ovens, the one piece, because they're tricky with regards to koshering them, especially if you want to use them for multi-statuses, kosher parv, kosher dairy, and meat. It's not so simple. So it's better to avoid the shaila. If someone has it, speak to a rav for guidance, but it's better to avoid it when can. Okay, halacha yud beis. We explained in Sivches, we said that we should not allow a housekeeper to cook or to bake in our ovens today. But those ovens that have a burning fire in them, because is better as and when you open up the gas, the fire goes. The Jew lit the fire, the actual the pilot. It's permissible for a non-Jew to cook in this oven. We can rely on what it says in the poskim. The non-Jew lights the fire from a fire that a Jew lit. It's not called Bishul Akum. We should only rely on this burning pilot if it's being done in a Jew's home, because as I said before, in a Jew's home you have another opinion that also says we can be lenient in a Jew's home, so we're combining the two leniencies to make it something that's considered to be acceptable to do from the onset. Those that say, even so, we should only rely on this leniency. Shas al-Chak means in a case of duress, where we have no other choice. But the brand new type of ovens, which are very, very eco-friendly, supposedly are saving on energy consumption and all that, this heter doesn't apply at all because you don't have a burning pilot. It becomes a burning issue. Excuse my humor. So then there would be no heter at all for a housekeeper to cook in the home. They're only allowed to warm up foods that have already been cooked by the Jew. But the evidence, Bishlo, Amaychel Mutter. The poskim right, you have to be very, very careful and conscious not to allow a housekeeper to cook for you. Because many different problems can arise from this. Even if you have a well-trained housekeeper who knows the dairy side, the meat side, and they're very well trained and taught not to switch them around, not to mix them up. They're not entrusted keeping them separate. We're not allowed to trust them in that because they don't keep kosher, therefore we cannot give them that level of authority. If you have a housekeeper who's Jewish but not religious, it's also an issue because they don't keep kosher. We cannot entrust them to have the sensitivity that's necessary with regard to kashrus. The number I feel, yeah, okay. If someone has a case of need where you need someone to cook, like a housekeeper to cook, you should ask a shaila for Rab how to guide you what to do. This is a common shaila you have, by the way. If you have elderly people at home and they have an aide, the elderly people, it's not safe for them to cook anymore. They can't turn on fires because they might forget to turn it off. It'll be dangerous. The shaila. So this is one of the things that they do in such cases is they light a flame. They'll have like a 7-day candle that'll be lit by a Jew, and then the non-Jew would light fire from there, and then light the burner. Or you'll have even lahavdil, a Jewish person is not religious. It's better to be machmer. He says machlokes about that. But how do you actually make sure that's being done? So one way to make sure it's being done properly would be to check the camera system. You have a remote camera system, and you're on the phone with the housekeeper or the person and say, I'm going to be turning on the fire, and you can watch it happen. That would be acceptable. There's just different ways to deal with this. Sometimes other people may use the tool of FaceTime, actually see it happen live, so to speak. Okay, halacha yud gimel. What about salting and smoking? Not smoking cigarettes, smoking food. The only time the rabbi is prohibited only if a non-Jew cooks. Whatever becomes edible through salting, ishon, or smoking, or kivisha, or pickling, that does not have a prohibition of Bishul Akum. Vegetables or fish that are pickled in a solution, like pickled cabbage, or you have pickled cabbage and things like that. What's malachal? I forgot that. You know what that is? Cucumbers. Pickles, yes. Pickles or cabbage, yeah. Or herring, if you put salt on it. There's no Bishul Akum problem because that's not a normal way of cooking. Even though you can take a fish and keep it in a bride, and it'll be ready to eat. It'll taste delicious. It'll be succulent, etc. It's not a problem of Bishul Akum. That's not called Bishul. Anytime any food that becomes edible through drying it in the sun, that's not called Bishul Akum. It's not a problem of Bishul Akum. I told you this story from 20 years ago. My wife convinced me to try a fish. We were in a restaurant together that was pickled. It was marinated overnight, not cooked. It was very soft. I guess maybe a vinegar and it's something. It just got it, became buttery soft. It was delicious. It's a shame she told me it wasn't cooked because I would have believed it was. It's hard for me psychologically to get used to the fact of eating a fish that wasn't cooked. But it actually taste good. What about steaming? Steaming is a machlokes. Some say that food that's cooked through steam, the hevel and there's no Bishul Akum problem. Because the steam is not called fire that's cooking. Those that differ on this. So it's machlokes. So by the way, in practice, steam cooked foods that are cooked in a factory setting, we're lenient to say they don't have to be Bishul Yisrael, because the factory setting has another leniency. The fact that the person in the factory, John Doe, who's making the food in Arkansas and it's being delivered to somewhere on the East Coast, you're not going to have any relationship with the person who's cooking the food because you're not going to know each other. So there's more distance, there's more protection in place. That's another reason why we could be lenient. So in conjunction with that, and the steam had their Minchas Yitzchak writes that's permissible to be lenient in that regard. Ulam Davishan, especially dates Leo, I think it's something that gets ready to eat through roasting or frying. That would have a problem with Bishul Akum, according to all opinions. Any questions? Okay, let's go weiter. Tavshil hatzorich shipur, a food that needs further enhancement. Now, there's two levels of enhancement we speak about in Jewish law. One of them is the salt at the table. That means that the food is ready to be served, Some people like it a little saltier, some people like it less salty. That's more of a preference issue, but you don't say that the food that needs more salt is not ready to eat. Serve. You can still serve it, put a little more salt in. But you have other foods that there's garnish you have to put on, you have to put on all kinds of marinades, spices. You would never serve it without that. That's different already. That's considered to be a little more activity. So tafshel tzorach shipur. You have a type of food that needs further enhancements. Right? It's not ready to bring it to the table. Tafshel sheinuroi los al shulchan malachim. Food that you wouldn't serve at a king's table. Achi yishupar kitzas. So you make it a little bit nicer, you enhance it, and you beautify it. With spices and honey, and the non-Jew cooked it, but it wasn't yet garnished up, it wasn't yet put together. According to one opinion, the suffix of Nesam B'dim Bishul Akum. Because you wouldn't yet serve it, because it needs further enhancement. Although they say no. Already considered like Ela Shulchan Aruch would be aser and called v'chol zeh meisov zatavan and vadash ein nas al shulchan achila. That's what we're talking about. Where you're adding those garnishments, it's not done on the actual table of serving, ela b'mitbach in the actual kitchen. Aval matikan dakalas al shulchan achila. But if you're talking about these extra garnishments or adding of spices, it's done by the table itself, like you're adding the salt and the pepper. That certainly doesn't help. Let's say, for example, a non-Jew cooked something, and a Jew added some milk to it. The food is still bishul akum, the chol hashitas. Because the food is ready in its current state to be served at the table. And as such, it's still a problem. So only when the food is not ready to serve, then according to one opinion, you could still save it and garnish it through a Jew to make it Bishul Yisrael, but even then it's machlokes. Some say that doesn't help anymore. How you define whether or not a food is kosher, there's different criteria. One of the criteria is l'lafes beis apas, the type of food that would accompany bread. Meaning that you'd eat it together with a meal. Or the type of food that your friend would invite you over to come and eat. The type of food that would be accompanied with a meal. So a snack food would not be in that same category. Look at Halacha Zayin, the bottom of page Ayin Beis. This is we say. You would serve at a king's table. Perusha, it means it's served at a king's table together with bread. Eaten together with bread. It's not eaten together with bread. It's not eaten as a dessert. It does not have a problem with Bishul Akum. The Ikar halacha is that if it's not something you eat together with bread, it's not considered to be oila shulchan malachim. That's why, for example, it's brought down that Seichem brings down, and also I think the Bakit also brings down that drinks don't have to be made Bishul Yisrael, even though a lot of drinks are hot filled or cooked. Because a drink is something that we say in kevel shtia, a person can just drink on the go. Every car today has a cup holder. You can't go on a trip without a cup holder. Against the law. You have to have the coffee or your favorite tea or your Pepsi, whatever your fix is. But because we drink all the time. And therefore, it's not something that's connected specifically with a meal. Yeah.
So would it be okay to go to these like juice bars around home?
Excellent question. It's okay to go, but there are a couple of things that you need to verify. You could be your own mashkicha. Number one, you want to verify that they're not juicing any produce from Israel. Because you have an issue of the subject of the tithing of trumas and maasros, the mitzvahs of Israel. It's not so common, but you can find Jaffa oranges, you can find carrots from Israel. There are certain things that could be an issue. You also want to verify to make sure they're not doing any milk products. And then you also want to make sure that they're not juicing any grape. Most likely they're not going to juice grape because it's very expensive to do so. If they would juice grape, you have a problem of not kosher wine. But most likely they're not doing that. And if they're not doing those things and the machine is clean, you're good to go. Yeah.
So
you can get like a couple of the carrot juice or something that kosher fruits, yeah.
If they are, if it comes to be that that blender that they use was for dairy, or does that make it?
If they cleaned it well before using it for yourself, and it was used for yourself in a cold application on a temporary basis, it's permissible still. But you have to make sure it's clean.
Fair enough. I want to tell you some like stories. I had a situation once. I was about to become campus for one of our restaurants.
Yeah.
And our cooks, they were friendly with the other cooks and they brought grapes over and they would snack on them. And one day they decided to put grape juice. And she handed me a cup. And I was about to make a bracha and drink it, and I was like, wait a second, I don't know if this is kosher. So I'm gonna make a whole shiloh, and they like drink the grape juice and they put it in the dishwasher, which got really hot. So like their impression was like we could still use the blender and the stuff in it, whatever. It was this whole thing.
Yeah, sensitive, very sensitive. Yeah, yeah, grape is sensitive. Okay, we have 3 more minutes to tell a little story. Wednesday night the Fabrengen, yeah, Thursday, she vacations coming to my house. It's to see my wife's sourdough and stuff, but even the top, I think. After, okay. Anyway, a little story. Let's do a story. Let's think we have. She told a story about the Alter Rebbe. The kislev. The story with the mashke, the story about Yitzhak Kislev. It was the first year after Yitzhak Kislev, there was a big covering, and Alter Rebbe was present, rejoicing in the Geula, because the year it happened, Sidon didn't find out until many days later. So we were rejoicing, and there was a Malamed. His name was Kusi the Malamed, Kusio. He was a teacher. He taught either children. He was very poor, and there was a barrel of mashke. Sidon was dancing around. Alter Rebbe was there, and he was very joyous. He was in the middle of Hasidic rapture. He was totally lost in joy, and so he's dancing around the barrel of mashke. His hat is bubbling on top of his head, and it falls into the barrel of mashke. So after Rebbe picks up his hat, and it's soaking with vodka, and he says, "V'koiva," puts it back on Kusil's head and says, "V'koiva Yeshua is bereish." The hat of salvation shall be on your head. And he gave him a bracha for Ashiras that he should become very wealthy, and he became very wealthy that year. The next year, by the third year, which is after the year after that, Chassidim remembered the story that happened to Kasil, and one of the other Chassidim wanted to reenact the same kind of thing. He's jumping around the barrel of mashke and dancing around. He's sort of, wobbling his head, and his hat falls in. The Rebbe didn't give him the bracha. Because by Kasil, it happened mitzvah pnimis nafshay, happened from his essence. You know the story with the mikveh and the vision to the Rebbe? I told you that story? A quick story. So the vision to the Rebbe, I heard this from one of the very funny. He has a minhag that if a bacha doesn't come to Seder, he would go to Bikkur Cholim. So the vision to the Rebbe, downstairs in the dormitory was the base medrash, the Rebbe was davening, and upstairs was the dormitory for the boys. And the boy didn't come to Seder. After davening, the Rebbe says to Gabi, "Where's this bacha?" He said, "The bacha is not feeling well." The Rebbe says, "Come, I'm going to make a Bikkur Cholim." The Rebbe goes up with the Gabi to the boy's room. See the bacha lying in bed, says, "What's the matter?" The bacha says to the Rebbe, "I'm haizik, I have the flu." So the Rebbe says to him, "What's this? So they tell you, why are you so sad?" He saw him long face. He says to the Rebbe, I can't go to the mikveh. It bothered him. So the Rebbe said, "I'll have you in mind when I tell you." And the bacha was at ease. A few months later, they heard the story in the dormitory. Another bacha wasn't feeling well. The Rebbe says, "Gabi, what's happening? Where's this bacha?" And he says, "He's not feeling well." The Rebbe says, "Come, make a Bikkur Cholim." After davening, the Rebbe goes up to the dormitory and comes to this bacha's room and says to him, "What's the matter?" Bacha says to the Rebbe, "Ich bin haizik, I have the flu." Again, he looks very sad. He says to the Rebbe says to him, "Why you look so sad?" He says to the Rebbe, Rebbe, ich kenne nicht gehen in mikveh. Rebbe, I cannot go to the mikveh. Rebbe says, mein Gabi wird er haben in Sinn. My Gabi will have you in mind.
Or you think that's either.
Oh, yeah, so let me know the date, and I'll make some calls. Yeah. So someone has to take the leadership, take charge of it. What about a vehicle?
It breaks it down, we got it on the box.
How many girls are there total? I have a van that only seats 8 people, so if you want to rent a van, maybe in conjunction, from my car. Okay. So let me know. You have my cell phone number and I'll try to make arrangements.
Hi girls, remember the documentations? This is hello, I'm gonna go over this if you want to hear it, but it's right here. Okay, I'm gonna turn it over to other doctors.